I'm going to have more clients. I'm going to win more cases. I'm going to be a damn good lawyer, and people are going to know about it.
Okay.
Hey, what's up everyone, it's Ryan here from The Y, and today we're gonna be taking a look at Better Call Saul. So after being enamored with Breaking Bad from start to finish, I basically assumed that was Vince Gilligan's magnum opus, and honestly didn't expect too much else from him. I did watch Better Call Saul for like a season and a half, although it didn't hook me on the first go around like Breaking Bad. But coming back to it now, I almost want to say it's the better of the two shows. Now that's not a hill I'm willing to die on, as they're both great in different ways. However, I think it's clear that Better Call Saul is the more refined product, which comes as a result of the whole crew leveling up. So, without further ado, here it is, 30 facts you didn't know about Better Call Saul. Chuck and Jimmy's relationship very much carried the first half of the show and primed his transformation into Saul in the later seasons. But in the words of Vince Gilligan, early on in the show, things were a lot different. Chuck was never going to be the bad guy, and Howard was always going to be the one to cause problems in Jimmy's life. Which is crazy because personally, it's hard to even imagine what the show would have looked like had they went in that direction. I feel like Chuck was such an instrumental piece in the audience sympathizing with some of the darker aspects of Saul's personality. And if it was only Howard as the bad guy, there would have just been a lack of emotional depth and meaning behind his character. Luckily, the writers saw the goldmine they had right in front of them and changed course to make it happen.
I don't want to hurt your feelings. But the truth is, you've never mattered all that much to me.
Something that may surprise you is that originally, Saul Goodman was only slated to appear in 3 episodes of Breaking Bad. That was the plan until producers realized that Goodman was actually filling a void left by another character, Hank Schrader.
Your commercials, they suck ass. So you better act in an epileptic whorehouse.
Is that like the one your mom works at?
For a long period of time, Hank was the voice of lightness in the show, always cracking a joke.
Damn. Chick's got an ass like an onion. Makes me want to cry.
Bringing levity to every situation. He fit the role perfectly, but following the Tortuga incident, Hank had really withdrawn, leaving the show with a gaping hole in the humor department. So, by making his first appearance 1 episode after Hank gets PTSD, Saul literally swooped in at the perfect time, leading to him becoming a mainstay on the show.
Siempre soy amigo! Siempre soy amigo del cartel! Shut up!
In my opinion, one of the most underrated performances in Better Call Saul belongs to Rex Linn, who played Kevin Wachtel. The man's presence as CEO was felt every time he was on screen. He was corporate as corporate can be, and handled the Jimmy situation just as you'd imagine someone like him would.
My bank was funding terrorism.
Stop it! I'm Saul Goodman.
Enough of this horse.
It's almost like playing the owner of Mesa Verde came natural to Linn, and in a way it did, as he actually worked at a bank prior to pursuing a career as an actor. Now, he wasn't the owner or CEO of the bank as you saw in Better Call Saul, but Linn did actually work his way up to vice president of Lakeshore Bank before it went insolvent. In the Season 1 episode Hero, you can see Gustavo Fring's famous shirt in the background, a full 19 episodes before he makes his debut. Or it could also be Dwight Schrute's, cause they're the only 2 people I've ever seen who wear that colored dress shirt. One of the more unusual but also heartwarming stories to come out of Better Call Saul is hearing that members of the cast lived together while filming the show. It all started with Bob Odenkirk and his wife buying a house down in Albuquerque, upon which they had the thought of why not ask some of the cast members to move in. Ray Seahorn was the first to accept, followed by Patrick Fabian, and even Josh Fadem joined in to become roommates. And according to Odenkirk, there were some major benefits to living with his fellow cast members. He said, "You have all the time in the world to rehearse. Patrick Fabian cooks amazing dinners, and someone's always down to go on a hike." Owing to its iconic predecessor, the pilot episode of Better Call Saul reached an overall viewership of 6.9 million. This made it the highest rated series premiere in cable history. But the record didn't last long, as Fear the Walking Dead beat it later that year with 10.1 million viewers. Although I think we all know which show turned out better in the end.
It's all good, man.
In a scary bit of news, Bob Odenkirk nearly died on the set of Better Call Saul. Ironically, it all went down right after filming the pivotal scene with Lalo, whereupon Odenkirk retreated to hang out with Ray Seahorn and Patrick Fabian. Out of nowhere, Odenkirk suddenly collapsed right in front of the two, at which point they both immediately screamed for someone to come help. Bob Odenkirk was having a heart attack, but he considers himself very lucky for two reasons. First, he didn't go off to be alone in his trailer right after shooting ended. And second, there just happened to be a medic nearby who helped administer CPR. After 18 minutes and 3 defibrillator shocks, his heart kicked back into rhythm, and then it was off to the hospital to clear the artery known as the Widowmaker. But all's well that ends well, as Odenkirk made a full recovery and only 5 weeks later was back on set. Better Call Saul is of course full of connections to Breaking Bad, but one you may have missed has to do with Gale and his place of residence. Looking at his address,
6353 Juan Tabo, apartment 6.
you can see that Gale lives on the same street as the Day Spa Nail Salon. Also, funny enough, the address to the nail salon in the show, 160 Juan Tabo Boulevard, is actually the address to a Day Spa and Nail in real life. And the crazy thing is, it looks almost exactly like the one you see in the show. Although Better Call Saul was finalized before Breaking Bad finished airing, that doesn't quite mean they knew exactly what the show was going to be about. Their first thought was to format the show in a way similar to Dr. Katz, Professional Therapist, wherein Saul would bring on celebrity guests and do 30-minute segments. However, upon realizing they had no clue how to write a show like that, it was scrapped. Next up was a sort of play on the format of Breaking Bad, which Gilligan described as 80% drama and 20% comedy. Their idea was to flip that for Better Call Saul and make it 80% comedy and 20% drama. But as he himself admitted, boy did that turn out not to be true.
Is there no other way, truly?
Better Call Saul is the gold standard when it comes to spin-offs, and a huge reason behind this is the attention to detail. The series came out in 2015, but was set in the year 2002, meaning that many changes had to be made in order to maintain historical accuracy. One such detail involved the German national football team and the number of World Cups displayed on the crew's hoodies. Looking closely, you can see that there are 3 stars, which is accurate for that time period, as Germany only won their 4th World Cup in 2014.
Werner. Ziegler.
The earliest conception of the show can be traced all the way back to the first episode that Bob Odenkirk was a part of, Better Call Saul. After filming this scene,
My real name's McGill. Yeah, the Jew thing I just do for the homeboys. They all want a pipe-hitting member of the tribe, so to speak.
a cameraman joked, "Can I get a job in the sequel?" Obviously, the man didn't mean anything by it. But as Vince Gilligan has stated, Breaking Bad was a place where even your jokes became true. The joke about, what if we got nominated for an Emmy for this? What if people started having t-shirts that said Los Pollos Hermanos on them? What if there were tourists who actually went to Albuquerque to look at these filming locations? Well, what if Saul Goodman got a spin-off was ultimately just another question in a series of what-ifs that all ended up coming true.
I'm like a god in human clothing. Lightning bolts shoot from my fingertips.
Is there anything more synonymous with the character of Saul Goodman than his terrible hairdo? The style was actually 100% Bob Odenkirk's idea, and this is what he had to say about it. It's cleaned up on the sides because he's all business, and the comb-over is to try to look younger, and the mullet is to try to look like a relaxed dude, but who's also capable of focusing and being serious.
I really like your hair.
It's not. Thank you.
So it goes without saying that when Cinnabon heard this line,
If I'm lucky, a month from now, best case scenario, I'm managing a Cinnabon in Omaha.
they were more than overjoyed. The Breaking Bad writers viewed it as just another line in an episode, but the Cinnabon marketing team saw it as maybe the best opportunity they'd ever laid their eyes upon. They immediately reached out, and with that, a partnership 7 years in the making was born. The terms of the partnership were as follows. Every season, Cinnabon would send multiple teams down to the Cottonwood Mall in Albuquerque, where they'd help prepare the storefront, bake thousands of cinnamon rolls, and train Bob Odenkirk and his fellow actors as if they were actual Cinnabon employees. And in return, Frank agreed to devour the cinnamon rolls like his life depended on it. Much like how episode titles in Season 2 of Breaking Bad foreshadowed the plane crash, a similar Easter egg was hidden in Better Call Saul. Namely, when you unscramble the first letter of every episode in Season 2, it spells out Frings back. It's also interesting to note that every episode in the first season ends in the letter O, that is, with the exception of episode 5, Alpine Shepherd Boy. This was done intentionally, and the initial plan was to title the 5th episode Jello, but the showrunners were unable to obtain permission to use the trademark, so they had to resort to the name we see today. A major theme that runs throughout the entirety of Better Call Saul is isolation. For this, New Mexico was the perfect setting. Saul and many others were the embodiment of that trait. And one filming technique in particular greatly enhanced that feeling of isolation. I'm talking about quadrant framing, a technique in which you divide the frame into 4 boxes, and then place your subject into one of those very boxes. The result is a huge increase in negative space, making the characters feel tiny in comparison to their surroundings, thereby provoking feelings of loneliness and isolation. Another great example of Better Call Saul's attention to detail takes place in a flashback scene during the episode Slip. After Jimmy and Marco break into his family's abandoned convenience store and are about to leave, there are 2 logos on the door that you just don't see anymore. The first is MasterCharge, which got rebranded to MasterCard in 1979. And then there's Bank AmeriCard, which became Visa in 1977.
After that, we can discuss Visa or MasterCard, but definitely not American Express, so don't even ask.
In the process of developing the story of Better Call Saul, Gilligan said it almost felt like they were making 2 separate shows, one of them focusing on Jimmy, Kim, Chuck, and Howard, and the other on Breaking Bad regulars like Gus and Mike. Obviously, the 2 worlds collided every so often and almost seemed to merge in the latter half of the show, but they were still cautious to ensure the integrity of the Breaking Bad storyline. The final season was full of realizations, growth, and long overdue punishments. And these are 2 of my favorite hidden details on 2 of the best characters. The following scene was among the heaviest in the show, and this shot exemplifies the difference between the 2 men, as although both had lost their sons, one is trapped while the other is free. Next up, let's take a look at Kim's life post moving to Florida. It's portrayed as boring, tedious, and uninspired. So I guess the real question becomes, why did Kim choose this life when she so obviously hates it? I like to view it as Kim punishing herself for all the terrible shit she did with Jimmy. You can't tell me she actually thinks Mr. Yep is the man of her dreams.
Yep.
And her job, well, her job as a brochure editor is eerily reminiscent of when Howard used to punish her with Doc Review.
You don't save me. I save me.
Probably my favorite monologue in the entirety of the show is Chuck's anger-filled rant against Jimmy. It's the product of great writing,
He defecated through a sunroof.
acting, and a worthy payoff to over 3 seasons of plot development.
Couldn't be precious Jimmy. Stealing them blind.
Now, when Chuck uses the phrase, stealing them blind, if you're anything like me, it likely rubbed you the wrong way the first time you heard it. The phrase we're all used to hearing is robbing them blind. But in this scenario, Chuck was absolutely correct in his choice of words. That's because robbing is specifically defined as taking something by force, while stealing more accurately refers to theft by means of stealth. If there's one thing you can say about the Season 5 episode Bagman, I think memorable is the perfect word. I say this for a couple different reasons. First off, the whole episode felt like a standalone piece, a survival movie set within a crime drama TV show. Not to mention the cinematography, references to Chuck's space blanket.
I got 2 of these. You want one?
No, thanks.
And thinking back on it now, I can't help but feel that this was the point of no return for Jimmy. He finally wades too far into the deep end, dragging Kim down with him, leading to their eventual breakup. Vince Gilligan described Bagman as one of the most difficult episodes he's had to direct in his entire filmmaking career, and you can see that he actually took inspiration from the 1962 film Lawrence of Arabia for many of the shots. According to Peter Gould, the relationship between Jimmy and Chuck was partially inspired by Robert Crumb and his older brother Charles. I'm sure you've all heard of Robert Crumb, the famous cartoonist better known as R. Crumb, but I'm guessing you haven't heard of his lesser-known brother who was the inspiration behind his career path. And much like how Chuck was the driving force behind Jimmy becoming a lawyer, Charles also suffered from mental illness and rarely ever left the house. Yet his illness wasn't an aversion to electricity, but rather a self-described homosexual pedophiliac tendency.
He developed this crush on Bobby Driscoll and it never went away. Bobby Driscoll's the kid who plays Jim Hawk, and he's never been able to have any real sexual life at all. He's never had sex.
Although he never did succumb to those desires, it all eventually became too much, and just like Chuck, Charles committed suicide. If you're a fan of the Breaking Bad Better Call Saul universe, you'll know that symbolism is heavily used in both shows to add an extra layer of meaning. Some examples are more obvious, while others are much more subtle. But one piece of symbolism I'm guessing you haven't seen comes in the season 1 episode Mijo. Whenever Abuelita is framed in the shot, the cross on the wall appears in the light, while whenever Tuco's in the shot, the cross resides in the darkness. Jimmy goes from James McGill to Saul Goodman, and finally, in order to avoid capture, Gene Takovich. However, early drafts of the script had his alias as Keith instead of Gene. It does make you wonder why they changed the name to be Gene. I feel like it is more in line with the look of Saul, but I'm also tempted to say that the name plays into the notion that some part of him wants to get caught, as Gene is without a doubt a much more unique and identifiable name compared to Keith.
All roads lead back to you. It's Psych 101. You want to get caught.
At this stage, it's pretty well established that the fire and ice theory isn't just a theory, it's actual canon. For those unaware, the theory states that characters dressed in red are associated with crime, while those appearing in blue uphold the law or are at the very least innocent bystanders. We can see this in play as far back as the pilot episode, with Abuelita dressed in blue and one of the twins in red. Cut to Tuco and Nacho, and the symbolism is evident there as well. And if we examine Nacho further, just like how his character has one foot out the door, he switches back and forth with his color scheme. In full criminal mode, he's dressed in dark red. When he's setting up Lalo for Gus, he's again in the shade of red. But upon his death, the flower sprouting from his grave shows his true color. And much like Nacho, Jimmy is also somewhat conflicted and sways back and forth. When he's surrounded by people much deeper into the criminal life than himself, Jimmy is seen wearing blue in a sea of red. But when placed against a much more honest person in Howard, the contrast is stark. Another example is with his car having one red door. And of course, when he finally gets reinstated and first takes on the name of Saul Goodman, the symbolism is almost palpable. So it only took to the final season, but Better Call Saul is finally involved in a lawsuit. I feel like the show just had to be involved in at least one legal battle, and of course win it in true Saul fashion. And it looks like that's exactly what's going to happen, as Liberty Tax is suing AMC for trademark infringement. Their argument centers on a couple points: that the name of the company in the show is too close to their own, and that the inflatable Statue of Liberty is a symbol used to identify their real offices, ultimately misleading viewers into thinking that Sweet Liberty Tax Services was in fact one of their own. The tequila that Gus poisons Don Eladio with, Zafiro Añejo, makes more than a couple appearances in Better Call Saul. It's first seen when Kim and Jimmy con Ken into buying them shots. Then in season 3, Jimmy buys a bottle to celebrate the Sandpiper case getting settled, but has to settle for taking a shot with Francesca.
You. Shots.
Shots.
In season 4, Kim and Jimmy kill the bottle following Chuck's suicide. And finally, in season 6, Jimmy is about to buy another bottle to celebrate D-Day when he spots Rand Casimiro. After being approached by Vince Gilligan with an offer to star in his very own spin-off, it follows that Bob Odenkirk immediately said yes. But his reaction was actually the exact opposite, and he simply said no, which is crazy, especially considering what a huge career-defining opportunity it obviously was. But in true Saul Goodman fashion, he had the perfect reason for saying no. His kids. They were 12 and 14, and going to Albuquerque for months at a time made Odenkirk worried that he'd just be missing out on too much of their lives. But ironically, it was also his kids who pushed him into taking the job. After hearing that he declined the spinoff on their behalf, they sat him down to say what a big mistake he was making. They said stuff like, "Well, you're going to disappoint a lot of people, and Dad will make it work, we'll be okay." And by the end of it, Odenkirk was inclined to agree. The cherry on top happened when he called the producers back to say that he reconsidered, only to find out that they already raised his salary to sweeten the deal. No BS, the final episode of Better Call Saul might be the most satisfying end to a show I've ever seen, and with it very likely being the last entry in the Breaking Bad franchise, the callbacks were numerous. Let's go over a couple of the references you hopefully haven't seen yet. The Time Machine by H.G. Wells has made a couple appearances.
Where would you go?
Meaningless question. Time machine.
This isn't the first time that Saul's been in a dumpster.
James McGill.
Saul gets his own Joker moment, much like Walt. Saul's request wasn't just random.
1 pint Bluebell mint chocolate chip ice cream every Friday for the duration.
When asked about regrets, Walt has just one.
My regrets.
Birthday, so I left the receipt in the box in case you want to exchange it.
We've definitely seen this airline before.
Wayfair 515, Albuquerque Center, Roger, climb and maintained 13,000.
It's what time?
It's showtime.
It's showtime, folks.
Just so we don't forget about Chuck.
He was an incredible lawyer.
Jimmy's new life in prison isn't all too different from when he worked at Cinnabon. And finally, these last few shots are absolute tearjerkers. When discussing how best to end the show, there were a couple of different scenarios they pondered. The first thought was to have Saul alone in a cell, but they decided against it as it would have been too cold. Then they thought, well, let's end it on the scene with the two of them smoking a cigarette. However, Gould felt it to be too dishonest. Finally, they settled on the shot we have now, with the two apart, but Saul finally at peace. Sadly, as of now, there are no plans for another spin-off set in the Breaking Bad universe. Of course, Gilligan said never say never in terms of potentially doing something down the line, but as it stands now, I think this would be the perfect place to leave things. Better to go out on top. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe for more content like this. Alright, till next time, have a great day everyone.